Welcome, everyone. Whoa, sorry about that. I got your attention. I apologize. I'll get used to this thing. The reason we have to use this, you could hear me easily if I didn't use this, but we're being joined and simulcast through Zoom out into the digital world there so that people can participate in this who aren't in the room. So thank you for the Zoom participants, and Johanna will let us know, if there's people out there who are participating, and if they have comments in the chat. Occasionally she may chime in and ask those, and what we'll try to do is repeat those questions and take them just like we were taking questions from you here live. And so first of all, thank you for joining us. This is workshop number 2 of this series of public discussions about the Manteca Community Homeless Navigation Center and Mixed Use Development Project. That's a mouthful. What we hope to do today is to describe the project for you and demonstrate why it's important that the city of Manteca do a project like this, and describe for you what it could look like, where it could go, and a lot of the details of what a navigation center is. And I'll touch on it real briefly, and I'll have Andrew from our company, which is LPA Architects from Sacramento, dive deeper and go into a lot more detail than I will. But in a nutshell, yes, this project is a homeless shelter, but it would be a lot more than just a homeless shelter. This project is actually required by the 9th U.S. District Court of Appeals. That agency or that body essentially issued a judgment that affects 10 states in the western part of the United States. I think it's 10. California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, sorry, I live there, I know that's how you pronounce it. Guam and the Mariana Islands, so however many states that adds up to. Every city, every county, every jurisdiction within those states is bound by this judgment, which says that you cannot issue citations to people camping or using public spaces for being homeless if you don't have adequate housing provided for them so that they can spend the night there. So essentially it ties the hands of law enforcement to not do anything unless you've got something provided. So that's the homeless shelter part of it. What this project does is takes it a step farther than that and tries to deal with the residents of the city who do not have a home and actually provide a way for them to take the journey back into having permanent shelter and having a job and having a place in society where they are not homeless, where they are home. So what we're going to do is demonstrate to you some of the community services that would be provided at this facility to bring people on that journey of being on the street and being homeless to being sheltered and actually being able to afford having their own place to live. So that's basically the why for this project. And I'm going to have Andrew get into the how and the what and a little bit deeper dive on the why. And what we're going to do this evening is, after a series of 4 or 5 presentations that Andrew is going to give, we'll take a break and we'll take questions from you, and we'll have a community discussion basically, and we'll record the questions or the comments that you have on this big tablet of paper so that we have a record of the things that you tell us. But really importantly, how many of you were at the first workshop that was 2 weeks ago? Okay, so most of you. So how many of you were not at the workshop that was 2 weeks ago? So we have 3 people in the room who you're seeing this almost essentially for the first time. Well, I'm glad that you came, and I want to thank you for coming and participating in this. This is important. We want your feedback. We got a lot of feedback 2 weeks ago that we're going to summarize for you because some of you weren't here, but we want to summarize it for the people who were here so that they can have that experience and they can tell us if we didn't capture it correctly, they can correct it and we can correct their record. Because really we want this to be completely transparent. We want your input. You know, this is your project, this is your city, and so it's not my project, not our project. We can design it for you, but we need to have your input because it is your project. Sure, my name is John Courtney. Sorry, we had name tags, we just didn't write our names down on them. So my name is John Courtney. I'm a senior project manager for the firm called LPA. And then Andrew Wickham is a designer. And we have Artie Patel, who is an architect. So we've been hired by the city to guide you through this process and work with you, gather your input. And essentially, by the time we're finished with this in about October, November, and we'll show you what the next steps are at the end of the show, but basically the big next step is to go to the Planning Commission, and then the step after that is to go to City Council with recommendations and allow City Council to take it up and take action on it. Did you have a question? Sacramento. Sacramento, yeah. Sacramento is in the process of doing just what we're doing here. And we've probably a half mile from where you live. Yeah, yeah. So, and again, every community has to deal with this in one way or another. And we've worked on a lot of projects, as I said last time we were here. We've done quite a few of these because these are very hot topics right now for all the communities across California. Homelessness is a big issue. Even the governor is trying to figure out ways to deal with it at the state level. But we have the ability to deal with it at the local level because it affects localities, you know, cities, neighborhoods, not just the state of California. Did you have a question? Tony wants to answer that question, so I'm going to give her the mic.
Yeah, I probably don't even need this. Anyway, I'm going to keep it like this far away. No, I'm not the city attorney, but I work in the city manager's office. And actually, the city attorney was at our last workshop present. So yes, he's very involved. Couple of things about this navigation and mixed-use projects is it's multifaceted. So it's not just a navigation center. There's multiple components. There's going to be multiple funding areas, and so it's not just a shelter. It's the site that we're using. It's for a multi-use site. It's not going to happen over time. Yes, funding is going to have to be addressed, and we're looking at all different shapes and forms of funding, whether it be from the state or federal government. Well, I think I mean, I guess, you want to answer that, Johanna? As far as, I mean, I don't know that it's going.
Okay, sorry. So I'm gonna say something really quick right before you, Mayor. Is that okay? No, okay. He's a mayor. He gets to.
Okay, let me answer that question this way. Right now, we have homeless walking throughout the town, doing whatever the homeless do, with very little care for the rest of us. The difference between a homeless shelter and a navigation center is very clear. A shelter only provides a bed. Some provide food, but basically the court has declared that before we can enforce the laws, we had to provide them with a bed. So they basically sleep there. It doesn't stop them from being in town. They're out in the day, okay? They do whatever they want. Okay, a navigation center provides them with a bed, but it also provides them with an ability to change their way of life or work themselves back into society. They get counseling, they get training, they get food, they get a bed, and so on and so on and so on. So the difference, and I understand your question, the difference between the two is that they're just not going to get a bed and they're going back out in the morning. And they can come back in the evening. And that's all it is. A navigation center is going to help them come back into society. So they may not be required to go out during the day. You know, they'll have to do training. They're going to get food. They're going to get counseling. They're going to get drug addiction. A multifaceted facility to deal with the homeless. And that's basically the difference. And that's what we're working on. The council has decided that we are going to develop a navigation center, not a shelter. The shelter doesn't really accomplish anything other than providing a bed. Okay, no, wait a minute. Let me explain something to you. The court system has taken the privilege away from you and from us. We cannot enforce the laws unless we comply with a court decision. No, the city of Whittier is doing nothing different than we're planning to do in every other community on the West Coast. It's the same thing. Some may paint the building blue, some may paint the building yellow, but it's the same basic system. You know, and frankly, if we don't do anything at all, and that's an alternative. We don't have to do anything. The council can decide and go along with the opinion here that we do nothing. Okay, but then you can't complain that the homeless are out destroying property and creating problems. You can't arrest them for what? Okay, if where they're we can't do that. Okay. You know what? We can debate the issue, but we can debate the issue, but frankly, that's not a solution. Yes, sir. Hang on. This gentleman wants an opportunity to say something.
Further refine the point. Part of the opening statement is characterizing this as, so we can't conduct enforcement unless we have this shelter in place. So is it used as a vehicle to then have enforcement, or?
Well, as I said earlier, we could just build a shelter. Okay, but that doesn't solve the problem. All it does is take them off the street at night. Allows us to cite them or take them to a shelter and they have to spend the night. But they're out in the day. Their lifestyle doesn't change. It's the same. Navigation center will provide them with a bed, yes. So then we can then enforce the law. But it also begins a process to change their lifestyle and bring them back into society. And I'll tell you this, we're not going to get every one of them. Half of them probably don't care. They love doing what they're doing. Okay, but if we remove half of them, that's half we don't have to deal with. Half you don't have to put up with.
Hey, real quick. Oh. Hey, real quick, can I cut you off for a second? We can debate everything, every scenario all night long. However, debating things like that can't institutionalize drug addicts. Can't do this. It's against the law. Matter of fact, California is almost decriminalized. We got it down to California. They voted Prop 47, drugs used to be a felony. Now they're just a misdemeanor. Most of the time they get a citation, they get on their way, and we just take and book the drugs. It's different. It's not, when I first started this career, you had methamphetamine, you went to jail. You did timing in jail. You could go to prison over that. Now you're not even going to go to jail. So it's not, this, you'll get a citation just like anybody else. That's not true. It's not true. That's not true. Not true.
Part of the project is to actually do an operational study. So that's really the next step before we go to the planning commission. But I will say, as the mayor's saying, really the decision point is, do you just want a Band-Aid? A homeless shelter is just a Band-Aid. You're not going to fix anything with a homeless shelter. A navigation center will be institutional changes over time so that you can actually solve the issue for the long run rather than just put a Band-Aid on it with a temporary homeless shelter. So we do have plenty of points during this presentation for comment and for more dialogue. Okay. I'll say part of the reason why is because there aren't navigation centers. This could solve that problem. This is a first step towards solving the homeless problem. Yeah, and to your point, I mean, some of these, there's now a fact sheet on the website, on the city's website. So if you have other questions, read that fact sheet. Click on the links to find other documents that are going to be linked in that web page. So you can learn more about it. And the zoning would be part of that as well. So I'm going to have Andrew go through the presentation, and we'll take more comment as we get to certain points in the presentation.
Hear me? Yeah. So we've kind of already started down this road, but wanted to kind of explain the differences between a navigation center and a homeless shelter and why a navigation center is different. It's more than just a bed. It's providing those resources so that people can get off the street permanently. And that's the idea, not perpetuating the issue of homelessness, but getting them off the street permanently and back into society. This is a typical timeline and flow for someone who comes off of the street into the navigation center. Usually there's a timeline associated or time limit associated with the navigation center. It depends on the operator and the community, but usually it's 0 to 3 months. So you're in the big the tent or the big room. You have a bed for 3 months, and there's services associated with that. There's classes, there's counseling, there's addiction help, addiction therapy. There's mental and behavioral health resources available. There's group therapy, things that are geared towards building a sense of community and hope in the individual. And that's very important in the success of that person coming off of the street and being rehomed permanently. After that, after you graduate from the navigation center, you go into the transitional housing. It's a little more private. So you're not in, general population, if you will. You've got a room to yourself, typically. And then there's a time limit associated with that as well. Usually 6 to 12 months. It depends on the operator. And the goal there is to find you permanent housing. You continue those services. Hopefully you've gone through enough of the educational program that you're doing well on your own, but you continue those services until you are rehomed. And that can be in the affordable housing, or it can be somewhere else. If you've landed a job, you've kicked your habit, and you can find a market rate apartment somewhere. If you have special needs in terms of maybe you've got mental or physical health issues or addiction therapy, and you need additional, permanent access to resources, there is supportive housing, called supportive housing. that has this support baked into it. Affordable housing and supportive housing are both indefinite. You're on your terms, you can live there permanently if you wish. So this is the typical journey that you would take to get off of the street. So this is a picture of one of the navigation centers that we've done. That's the bunking system. You come into the tent or the building and you get a bunk, and there's room for your belongings, for your pet, but you're very much in a general population sort of situation. But the navigation center really is a safe, clean, flexible environment that allows homeless people to rebuild their lives. That's really the goal. And it provides restrooms, food, and some of those resources that we talked about. Shelters are a bed for the night, just a place to get out of the elements. The navigation center is really so much more. And it's controlled, like we talked about. There's security, there's control points, it's fenced in, so people can't just come and go as they please. They have to check in through the front desk as they come in and go out. And part of that is learning to be independent, but having that structure, having that structured system and living in that structured system helps you learn how to get off the street. Because when you're on the street, there is no structure, right? And also, studies have shown that those entering the navigation center know that they have a limited stay, and therefore they're more committed and focused on their energies on seeking rehousing. And so people are a little more serious about it because they know that there is a time limit. It's not, oh, we can come here and stay here, until as long as we want. No, you're out of here in 3 months. So you gotta do what you can while you're there and take advantage of the situation. Transitional housing is that step. It's an intermediate step between the navigation center and permanent housing. Like I said, it's usually a room. There's restrooms. You still have access to those resources. Yes. So there's men's, women's, and family. And then transitional housing usually has that longer time limit. There is a screening process. But supportive housing is permanent housing for persons who require the special support. It could be physical, mental health, and developmental disabilities or substance abuse, things like that. And there's no time limit with supportive housing. And then affordable housing is permanent housing for low income persons. And it's typically in the form of an independent apartment. So it would be 1, 2, or a studio apartment. And this is an example of a affordable housing project. It is an apartment, and so people generally don't want to stay in affordable housing, and there's an income barrier. So you have to demonstrate your income as such to stay in affordable housing. So once you start making enough money, no, you pay rent in affordable housing, and so right. So right. So yes, the apartments around here, market rate apartments are expensive. Affordable housing is less expensive housing available to those people who don't make enough to be in a market rate apartment. But once you make enough money to be in a market rate apartment, you can no longer be in affordable housing. It's tied to income. These are some examples of the types of services available: mental, physical health specialists, addiction therapy, screenings, regular health screenings and assessments, behavioral health care, dental care, and then basic nutrition, just something as simple as providing a square meal 3 times a day. Education, job-specific training, getting your diploma or just general education, on-the-job work experience, and then rehoming programs, how to learn how to live on your own. Some of these folks don't have that experience. So this is how it's kind of structured. We're talking about navigation center, and then and there's a shelter component, part of that, what we're calling the center. You know, that is part of it. That's the big room. We showed a picture of one earlier. And then there's transitional housing, which is another part of that. And those rely heavily on this services component, this community services component. And that's everything in the blue box. It's what we classify as the navigation center. The other part of this project is the mixed use component, which has supportive housing, affordable housing, and then a commercial component. And the supportive housing has access to those services because they need them, they rely on them. And the type of access could be someone coming to their apartment on a regular basis as needed, or it could be that person going to an appointment somewhere and keeping an appointment in an office. But the idea is that they borrow from those services. And really, these are two different pieces to this pie on this development, and they are separate. With the exception of the supportive housing having access to the services that support the navigation center, they are separate. You should think of them as separate. Yes, so the commercial component could be anything. It could be retail, it could be a coffee shop, it could be it could be a place where someone learns to work. It could be a doctor's office or a dentist's office or an accountant or whatever. It would be open. It depends. It could be. It certainly could be something that is training. Yeah, that works with the navigation center to provide a place for those individuals to have a job and to get on the job training. Absolutely. That has yet to be determined. You know, that's one of the things that we're looking at and exploring. You know, there is an advantage to having leasable retail space in this development, and so that someone like a Starbucks could come in there and provide a shop and some of those resources. But they could have, the navigation center has programs and works with community-wide programs at, providing job locations for those people. So the residents of the navigation center would have access to those programs, not just on-site, but elsewhere in the community. Yes. Some of those could be county health. So it's just so some of the services are already in place, volunteer organizations. Some of them are outreach programs from local churches and church groups or education or other community groups. Could be county health officers that are already assigned to the county. So there are programs that are already in place or the privately funded. Don't know. It depends on the operator and who is scheduling those services. It's hard to say. All you can say is probably Absolutely. So this is a kind of a confusing diagram, and I apologize for that, of what a navigation center is, kind of a breaking down of its most simple components. There's an intake component, and so when you come to the center, there are usually a couple beds set aside. They're in isolation, and that's so that someone who comes in high or drunk or whatever has a place to sleep it off and to sober up before they come into the facility. But it also gives them, during that intake process, to have an evaluation and assessment of their condition, their health condition, and also to prevent any infectious diseases coming into the facility or things like bed bugs or cockroaches or lice that could wreak havoc on a facility like this. So it's kind of this isolation facility. Part of that intake is also your security checkpoint. So you've got your officer, your security guard would be there monitoring who comes into and out of the facility. There are offices associated with that. There's the operator who would have a permanent office in the facility, as well as several other offices where those resources could come in. The county health or another counselor could come in and have a private place to have a conversation with the residents. Yes. Is that? Yes. Mhm. That, yeah, and that is really just a single room, right? It's not a gang shower. It would be an individual room that would be labeled gender neutral, and so those people who are not comfortable showering in front of other people, yeah, and and there are a lot of people on the street who have gender identity issues, and that's why they're on the street, or part of the reason they're on the street. So that's
Excuse me, this woman, excuse me, can we be quiet while we're doing like, because this woman, not all the.
that would be up to the operator, but generally no. Yeah. Right. No. Mhm. Yeah, we haven't designed the facility yet, so we haven't really looked at those types of issues and where that security needs to happen, but that would definitely be something that we take into consideration. Sometimes it's a room. Yep. Which we've discussed quite a bit already, and a couple of things in evaluating the criteria for this type of project is, the Navigation Center really gives residents the opportunity to follow the same daily routines as they would in permanent housing. And that's the goal, is to get people into a daily routine. So it's very important to have access to things like transportation, groceries, and other services, food services, so that within a walking distance, so that they can learn to establish that routine into their lifestyle. Because not everyone has a car, drive, criteria like being walking distance to restaurants, groceries, transit, other daily services is critical. As you can see, this site is within 5 minutes walking, as you probably know, from the transit center and Walmart, Safeway, and some other food resources. little shopping distance, and then 10 minutes from the downtown central business district. So it's really a good location for that. It's also close to utility connections. It's flat and it's not developed. It's a vacant lot, which makes it less costly for the city to develop, which is also important because if you've got to run a lot of utilities out to someplace, that can be very expensive with little payoff. So the concern is it is close to residential, but it does have light industrial commercial on three sides of it. It's not in the center of a residential location. And it has the primary access is off of Carnegie. And so that access is very easy to control and to monitor. And South Main Street would be left open and uninhibited by some of the traffic associated with this. So here's that access showing access off of Carnegie. It's adjacent to South Main Street, so walkability is maintained, which is important. A lot of these people don't have cars, and that's important, or their cars don't run. So that's important to maintain. That's part of the reason why this site has been chosen, or how we've landed on this site. And then here's a diagram. I think we shared this last time as well, but here's a diagram of how we're organizing those different components. If you remember, there were three different components: mixed use, open space / services, and a navigation center. We want to put that navigation center as far away from the residential as we can, and put the affordable housing, the residential and mixed use component along Main Street, where it can enjoy access up and down Main Street as well. And then the buffer between the two is that open space and services as well. So here we presented last time 3 options. I'm not going to go through these options in great detail, but I wanted to share some of the comments that we got back from these different options. So this was one configuration showing in all 3 of these diagrams, purple is the housing component, the affordable housing component. Green is open space. Orange are those community services, and blue is the navigation center. Just keep that in mind. Here we've got parking in the middle, a lot of open space, and then the affordable housing oriented along Main Street with the navigation center in the back. You can see on the image on the left, a lot of blue. Blue was good, things that people liked in the workshop, and then red are things that people didn't like. Didn't like access off of Main Street, didn't like the dog park, and then a couple comments about the parking, and then the location of the access off of Main Street. Option 2, very similar to option 1. The main change here is the configuration of the affordable housing along Main Street was oriented a little bit differently, and that kind of is picking up on the residential scale of the houses across the street and not having this big wall of a building right across the street, but kind of narrowing that profile a little bit. Couple of red dots on the entry from Main Street and the parking there. Someone said, "Gets my vote." Someone else said, "No site entry on Main," but you can see there's a lot more blue dots than red dots. Option 3 is a little bit different than the others. Brings that open space out towards Main Street, but then really the big change is moves the affordable housing inboard and puts parking off of Main Street for that affordable housing. And so this one had a lot more red dots on it, as you can see. Really didn't like parking on Main Street. That was a big no-no or issue with this option. Liked the park and the shaded sort of park-like component with this one. Liked the idea of affordable housing. This one also was questioning whether there were sidewalks on the north and south side. How would people navigate through this project? And then seems like the comments on this one were relatively negative, not too many positive on this plan. So what we did is kind of, these are the general comments on all three options, what was similar between all three of them, and then what was in terms of likes and dislikes. So liked the affordable housing along Main Street, liked the navigation center being pushed into the back of the site, liked open space and having parking in the center of the site and not on Main Street, and liked that the primary entrance was off Carnegie Court, and being able to monitor and control that access to the site. Didn't like adding vehicles to Main Street, which was the big thing. I think there's already enough traffic on Main Street and trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So what we did is synthesized all those comments and looked at our options, our plans, and tried to come up with a version that was a hybrid of what everybody liked of those options. And really what it comes down to is a kind of version 3.0, if you will, of option 1 and 2, kind of hybridized together, if you will, if I can make up a word. So here you can see the housing component still along Main Street. We've kind of played with some of the shapes a little bit. We still have the same density and the same housing counts, but it's a little more realistic in terms of what an apartment development might look like. We've got open space for the residents in between the buildings and number 2 there, and then the apartment buildings would create that sort of sheltered open space in the middle. Parking is at the back, and then the dotted red line is a wall, and that is separating the 2 facilities. There would be controlled access through that at any point through that wall. That would be a locked gate that would have some sort of key card or key code or something like that to make sure that people can't go in and out as they please. There's an open space component up here by the community services building. The community services building acts as part of that barrier between the 2 facilities, between the navigation center and the affordable housing development. And that's so that people in the transitional housing have access to the community services there if they need it. And also people of the facility here have access to the open space if they need it for a structured program. Yes. It's a wall. Yes. The commercial in this one would be this building and this building. Right, they'd be close to the parking associated. And then you can see the navigation center on the east edge here with its own parking lot for that navigation. That's probably a better view. I get to see scale. Yes. There's the navigation center, if that's what you mean. The navigation center is in blue. The community services building, that's a kitchen, dining room, common room, TV room, classrooms. There's a market. I should clarify that the affordable housing component is not going to be exclusively for the use of the navigation center. People will, the idea is that they'll work with the navigation center to rehome people, but you can't have vacant apartments. That's not being leased. This is the program. So we're targeting roughly about 192 units in the affordable housing. It's a mix of studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. And along with that would be 15,000 square feet of that commercial component, retail, live-to-work studios, work experience, et cetera. So that I'll just point out here the two red bars are those commercial components. And then the navigation center is targeting around 300 beds. The exact, yeah, they would have an open estimates. We have to do an operational report and part of their pro forma. And part of what we'll be evaluating is what makes it desirable for a developer. And the commercial oftentimes makes it a little bit more desirable for the developers to come in. There's some imagery of sample projects that we've done or others have done. And so it can really can look and feel many different ways, whether modern or a little more traditional. But the idea is that these look like apartment buildings, these affordable housing components. They can range. This one here in the upper right was done with shipping containers. And it goes up very quick, and shipping containers are a cheap way to build. So that could be an option. Or it could be traditional stick-built, traditional construction practices, et cetera. And then here's some examples of different navigation centers around the state. This one in the upper right is a project that we did out of shipping containers in Park. Tiny homes are another form of transitional housing usually, and fairly cost effective. And then this is a little bit more traditional construction in the lower left, and upper right was a modular build. So there's a lot of different options and types of delivery and construction that you'd have to weigh those options because there's different cost benefits to each type. It varies, but that's hard to say. I was part of a competition that had to design a tiny home for less than $10,000 material, and we were able to do it. But that doesn't include any labor